And welcome back to the Leeds Lens. Something slightly different today on the news show. And I still think it is kind of news, which is why we're bringing it in today's show. But we're going to be doing a show really dedicated to the situation regarding Daniel Farke at this moment in time. Because I think on this channel, obviously, I think people on this channel, the usuals, will know I'm obviously quite positive about Daniel Farke and what he's done for this Leeds United. I think he's done a really good job since he's taken over, obviously, from the absolute mess of Allardyce and Leeds United getting relegated. I thought at that time we were in a precarious position, but I think he's stabilised the club. I think he's brought us back into the Premier League, which is the fundamental aim. Yes, probably at the second time of asking, but I think overall he's done a pretty good job. But we constantly have people on this channel, you'll know the regulars, PSF, Easy, other people on this channel as well, talk about Daniel Farke and his struggles and the problems with Daniel Farke at Sport Club, and they actually want him removed. And I was just thinking today when I was looking at my video, obviously, we on this channel, part of the channel is we want to sort of look at different opinions, and we don't just want to go, I think this and that's the end of the world, and that's the end of it, really. We want to look at opposing viewpoints. And I think there's been a sort of conversation on this channel, and I've thought about it, and I want to be a bit more reflective around about what you guys are thinking and where your reason is. So even though I don't think Daniel Farke should be sacked as a fundamental state at this moment in time, I thought it was a nice video to look at sort of the opposition viewpoints if you don't think that. But we're also going to be looking at reasons why you would keep him as well. So it's really just going to be, in total, a discussion about Daniel Farke and his sort of time at Leeds United, and if a change would make sense. Because I think we've some people are potentially scared to have this conversation at times, and maybe it's a conversation that people just don't like. And I think when we're doing this conversation, part of it is that people are going to have contrasting views on this situation. Some people don't even like people to talk about it in the first place. I disagree on that. I think you can discuss more things, especially because at the end of the day, this is only football. And if Daniel Farke would be sacked, even though I don't want it to happen, let's be honest, he's not exactly like he's going to be on the breadline. Like, a lot of people are going to struggle a lot more than Daniel Farke if he got sacked to get him a few £1 million payoff. He'd still be all right, let's be honest. So I think we can have this conversation. I don't think it's the end of the world. But I just think this is quite let's say it's a conversation where people have quite strong viewpoints either way. I think that's what we've seen. And I get that. It's football, and this is how it works. And that's what we encourage on this channel. But I just thought it was interesting to sort of just do a whole sort of conversation around Daniel Farke. So we've got a reference point and where we can go back. Because I think what this has brought this theory in my head about Daniel Farke is that, obviously, we were talking on, not yesterday's video, the day before, and we were talking about Leeds' fixtures coming up and how important these next two games are for Daniel Farke. Obviously, we play Forest away. Then we play Aston Villa at home. Two really, for me, quite tricky games, but also games where Leeds United, I think, should be trying to target points in. And I think if Leeds United weren't to target points in them games, and we didn't get points in them games, more importantly, I think it could be an interesting conversation at that point. Regarding Daniel Farke, because after that, as well, everybody knows, we've got Chelsea at home, then we've got Man City away, and then we've got Liverpool at home. And even if you are the most staunch sort of Daniel Farke out man, which I know we've got a few of this on this channel, you'd still accept that they're going to be hard games no matter who the manager is, naturally, just because the squad's not at the level of them squads, which we all know and accept as well, being a newly promoted team. Chelsea at home, even though Chelsea's not been unbelievable this season, Liverpool as well, they've not been unbelievable. And obviously Man City away, they're tricky games for any manager. So I think what I'm trying to say is, if he was to lose his next two, I think he's in severe bother. So I think this is probably a potentially premature conversation from where I actually think about it, and if I think he should leave the football club. But I still do believe that this is a sort of, as I said, a conversation that could be sprouting maybe before people think, because I haven't seen other people who are potentially Daniel Farke inners look at the idea that actually if he does lose his next two, which is totally probable, by the way, Forest away under Sean Dyche have beaten Porto. They've drawn with a really in-form Man United team. Yes, they lost away at Bournemouth, but, I mean, Bournemouth are a pretty good team, they're fourth in division. So there's every chance that we lose there. And Villa, I think, have won the last 7 games or something like that. So there's every chance that they beat us as well at Ellen Road. And if you lost them two, with obviously the games going up, that will be 6 losses on the trot. And then Daniel Farke is in severe bother. He's in severe bother. Because, to be honest with you, he's only won 1 of his last 5 games anyway. He's obviously won 3 in 10 all season. So I think Daniel Farke is doing okay, and he's got us where I think we should be at this moment in time. But I don't think he's massively overachieving. I don't think there's an unbelievable overachievement. I'm not saying that either. So as I said, that's why we're sort of talking about it today, because this, yeah, it might be slightly premature, but I still believe that that there's some relevance in the conversation. I really do. So if you were Daniel Farke out, and that was your perception of the current situation, I think you look at a number of factors, in my personal opinion. And when I've listened to a lot of people, obviously on this channel as well, who've talked about Daniel Farke out, and people on social media as well, the usual things I usually see is that, first of all, it's the way we set up in games. A lot of people seem to think that we set up in a much more defensive manner than we should do. We don't set up in a sort of we just set up too defensively, and we don't go hell for leather in games. I personally, on this point, disagree. I don't agree with that at all. I think we've seen at points this time and this season, if Leeds United do go blow for blow, we're not good enough to go blow for blow, and I think we'll get picked off. So as that statement, I fundamentally disagree with. I get your point, and I think in away games, maybe in the Championship, I think it's an interesting point. I think that could be an interesting argument. I remember playing Rotherham away, a team that ended up finished bottom of the league, and we drew the game 1-1. And he came out after the game saying every point away from home is a good point. And at that point, I completely disagreed with him. And as I said, in the Championship, we should have been winning it basically every game with the level of squad. But I think it's a different conversation, obviously, in the Premier League. So I don't mind us setting up more defensive away from home. I think you've got to be a bit smart. We've seen the Daniel Farke team, to be honest, before. Set up in a less pragmatic way with his Norwich teams, and a lot of the times they got hammered. Now, we've got a better team than Norwich, 100%, but I think we have seen that. Mark says, fact is, firstly in games, the players have to take responsibility and have to decide when they can actually perform, which of them can actually perform in the Prem. Yeah, I know, but the whole, I get that, Mark, and I think at times there is got to be responsibility from players. Like, say if Daniel Farke says play out from the back in a game, as an example, and you're getting pressed into oblivion, sometimes you've just got to make the wise call on the pitch to go along and hit a big man up front. And we've got a big man in Calvert-Lewin up front, so that is a possibility. So that's what sometimes you've got to do. And I agree with you. I don't think the players do enough in game to stop to play themselves out of trouble and to do the right things in moments, because Daniel Farke he's not actually on the pitch, is he, at the end of the day? So I do agree with you, Mark, but I do still think you see him with other managers. You see more of a potentially more defined style than you do with Daniel Farke. I think that's something I've always questioned. Has he implemented a complete style on this Leeds United team? Do we rely a lot more on individual moments, which I think a lot of people who would be Daniel Farke out would suggest? And I think the other thing with this as well, and that I always see a lot, which again I can sort of get behind, to be fair, this is one I can probably more agree with, which is that people have said constantly, but Scott, what's his Premier League record like? What is his Premier League record like? And this is something that truly, regardless of how strongly you might like Daniel Farke, you can't really argue with that. You can't really argue that his record with Norwich has been horrendous, because the fact is he's coached 2 years in this level, and I believe he's finished, if not bottom of the league, he's been relegated both times. That is bad. That is a bad start, and we knew that going into the season. I never thought we should remove him going into the season, but we knew that was a bad situation for Daniel Farke with his Norwich record. That is a poor record. The only thing that I think we will always say about the Norwich team is that I don't think, say you think Daniel Farke's not good enough, which I get, I don't think if you give another manager who potentially Leeds United will appoint as a replacement for Daniel Farke, if they do appoint somebody else, I don't think that manager would keep the Norwich team up, if you get what I'm trying to say. Because I don't think the Norwich team was ever good enough to stay at this level. I think the Leeds team is different. I think the Leeds team is good enough to stay at this level. I know it's hard, and I think we've got one of the weak, probably for me, bottom 5 weakest squads in the division. But I don't think we've got the weakest squad in the league, like I think you saw with Norwich. So I think there's less excuses this time with Leeds than there was with Norwich. But I do fundamentally agree that Norwich team, if you look through player for player, almost can't be regarded as a team in the Premier League, because I don't think they've got enough quality, anywhere near enough quality, to ever stay in the league, if I'm being totally honest. I just don't see how that team could have ever stayed in the league. So that's one thing I do get, in terms of, I get his poor Premier League record. I understand that. But naturally, context has got to be applied, in my opinion. That is the way I've always seen it. And I get people don't like that. But that for me, that's the truth of the battle. I just think that the Norwich team was just such a bad comparison, because we're just not the same. We're just not the same. It's almost like saying, well, Pepe Dava's winning the league because he's won the league with City before. It doesn't really make any sense. You've got to base it on challenges that you've had in the past and levels of squad that you've had in the past. And I think that's something that conversation doesn't really employ enough. And the other thing, and I think this is probably where I'm more at with it, I think if there's ever a reason to sack Daniel Farke and to not continue with him as manager, which is obviously this conversation, is this point. I think this is the key point. I don't think Daniel Farke's style of play, in my personal opinion, that what he builds his whole brand on and what Daniel Farke is as a manager suits the playing squad. I don't think it does. I think our squad, if I'm being totally honest, is a physical, strong, we talked about it the other day, long ball team. That's what it looks like to me. It looks like a team that's physical and strong, almost like a better version of Burnley back in the day. I know that sounds people not going to like that comparison, but that's what it is. It's a really hard-working, strong, physical, got a lot of runners in there, got height in there, can score a set piece. That is what our team is. And when I look at Daniel Farke and the style, and by principle, what his style of play is, he's a possession-based manager. He likes to have the ball, he likes to make passes, he likes to be the dominant team in the game. And I don't think we've got a squad that should be doing that in the Premier League. And I don't think we've got a squad that should be playing that style in the Premier League. So do you want a manager who suits your playing squad more? And I think we have seen at times this season, like a lot of people, something that people throw around Daniel Farke a lot is, he didn't change his style of play. I completely disagree. I think you've seen a number of different tweaks so far this season. I think you've seen, for example, in the Newcastle game, a quite clear long ball approach. And I think you've seen in the Everton game, and especially in the first half, a much more possession dominant performance where we had about 70% possession in that half. So I disagree that Daniel Farke can't change his style, but what is it? What is his principal style? What is his number one style? What is the style he's best at? So we know he's a 4-2-3-1 man on paper, but what is his style of football that he would play if he could do and he had all the attributes? His style of play is not a long ball physical team. That is not what he suits. It's just not what he suits. So that's where I think that's where the question is. Do you want a manager who suits the playing squad more? That I think and if I'm looking at managers that potentially could suit it, I am looking at a traditional old style managers. I'm looking at the likes of David Moyes. I'm looking at the likes of Sean Dyche. I think these managers suit our playing squad more because I think their style of play and the way they see the game and the way they imply their tactics and what they try to do in a game suits the playing squad more. Because that's the thing, how I think we're going to get results is playing that style. So I think I think of all the points around Daniel Farke, the lack of him, in my opinion, in his philosophy, suiting this playing squad is one thing you could definitely throw at him. I think you can definitely throw that at him. Other things I'd like to mention as well is poor substitutions. And I agree, again, I can agree with this. I do actually think that there's... I do actually think, if I'm being totally honest, that there is, and I've just seen BMG's comment as well, but I'll get onto that in a second, but I do think the substitution has been a problem under Daniel Farke. I know, like, when we had Bielsa in charge, I think you saw, I remember seeing it really early on, I don't know if people remember this game, we played Blackburn at home under Bielsa, and Calvin Phillips, as we know, under Bielsa was absolutely revolutionised in that sort of holding midfield role. And we played a sort of a 4-1-4-1, but that was his formation for the most part, not Daniel Farke, Bielsa. And Blackburn, we played them, I'm going to say maybe about October time, maybe September time, when he first appointed. And we actually ended up losing the game 2-1. We lost the game 2-1. But we went 2-0 down, and after about half an hour, if people remember this, he brought Calvin Phillips straight off, and he went to a 3-4-3. And we were absolutely brilliant for the rest of the game. We didn't win the game, but we saw a madness tweak from Bielsa, and it changed the whole complexion of how the game goes. I've never seen Daniel Farke do that. That's never happened in his tenure. I've never seen Daniel Farke be really, really struggling in the game and do something mad like that, and it completely changing it. I haven't seen him do that. So that is something I think you've got to throw at him. I don't think he manages a game as well as he could do. I really don't believe he does do that, if I'm being honest. So I think when, as I said, when we talk about this Daniel Farke conversation, I think people always think with me that I'm like, everything is like love about Daniel Farke. This guy's got his flaws. Everybody's got his flaws, and Bielsa had his flaws as well. But Daniel Farke definitely has flaws. And I think his lack of in-game management and his ability not to change a game is something poor. I also remember listening to Gary Neville on the Overlap a few years ago talking about his time at Valencia, and he was talking about coming up against these top managers, and actually Valverde, I think he mentioned, obviously, who is, I believe, he managed in Spain at this moment in time. He's managed Real Madrid. I think he might have managed Barcelona. I can't remember who he managed at the moment. Anyway, but he was saying he came up against him 3 times, and he kept changing the game. And Gary Neville said, I was on the touchline and I couldn't keep up with it. I couldn't keep up with the constant changes that he was doing. And I sometimes feel with Daniel Farke, obviously he's nowhere near as bad as manager Gary Neville, but I feel like sometimes on the touchline, the opposition manager is doing all these in-game tweaks, changing this player, changing that player, moving the systems around. And I think sometimes I watch him and think Daniel Farke can't keep up with that. That's what I genuinely feel like. Anyway, I'll get on some of your guys' comments because BMG's put a few in. BMG says, do you think then that there was a disconnect between Farke and the recruitment team if they didn't get the type of player he wants? Not exactly. This is an interesting comment, actually. Now, funny enough, when I was saying it, I was almost thinking this. I don't think that's true. I think they probably agreed in the summer that the way that Leeds United are going to stay up is targeting a more physical approach. My question is not that Daniel Farke doesn't agree that that may be the style that we have to employ, just that that's not his best coaching. When Daniel Farke is his best coaching, he's got everything he wants. He doesn't play that style. He's playing that style to try to keep Leeds in the Premier League, not because that's his philosophy. He's basically adapting, in truth. That's what I've seen from Daniel Farke. This long ball style is not Daniel Farke by trade. It's something he can employ, like every manager can change it. We've seen Pep Guardiola this season, where Arsenal employ a sort of a long ball strategy, low block approach, but that isn't his style. He can do it, but it's not his style. And this is what I mean about Daniel Farke. I think Farke in the summer has gone, this is not my style, and this is not how I want to play, but to keep Leeds United in the division, we're going to have to recruit in this manner, and we're going to have to play this brand of football. That is what I think we've seen. My question is, if Daniel Farke is going to adapt to play that style, are we not better bringing in a manager who actually fits that style, who actually wants to play that style in the first place? And I'm looking at the likes of David Moyes, etc., who fit that style. Like, as I said, if you want to play long ball football, you're not going to bring in Pep Guardiola, are you, to play it? And that's what I sort of mean. Obviously, I'm not comparing Daniel Farke to Pep Guardiola. I'm just saying stylistically, that's what I'm trying to say. And also, if we stay up and then can afford better players, Farke will be a better manager in the long run if he has better players. I agree with this. This is what I completely agree with. I think Daniel Farke is better usually with a team that's better in the division, if that makes sense. So I think Daniel Farke is very good at getting the best team in the league out of the Championship. And I also think if he had better players in the Premier League, a really competitive squad in the Premier League, as BMG says, then I think we'd see a better Daniel Farke. Like, I think if he had the Bournemouth team, I think he'd be doing a much better job. I think if he had the Brighton team, he'd be doing a much better job in getting more points. Because I think with better players, that would fit his style of play more and be able to manage. Like, I remember as well with this. I remember hearing a thing from Gerrard recently. And he was talking on a podcast with Rio Ferdinand. And he was essentially saying that he doesn't want to be a manager at a lower league Premier League club like he was at Aston Villa at that moment in time. He doesn't want that job anymore. He wants to be competing for silverware because that suits his approach more. And I do wonder with Daniel Farke if he's the same. Not that I'm on about fighting for silverware, but if he's better at a club who are sort of fighting for like league titles and they've got the best team in the division rather than sort of being an underdog. Because with an underdog, it's all about, like, a Danny Rose suits this amazing, like we saw at Sheffield Wednesday, where he's changing his system constantly to get the best out of his team and like completely adapting to the opposition and changing systems and changing styles and changing formations constantly. Whereas Daniel Farke doesn't like to do that. Daniel Farke likes to play 4-2-3-1 week in, week out and almost acts as if we're the better team in the division, if that a better team, when maybe we should be adapting game in, game out to managers. BMG says, Bielsa also took Strake off and put Shackleton after about 20 minutes in the Villa game where Bamford got that hat-trick. Yeah, he did. That's what I mean. And we saw, there was tons of examples. There's probably more. But that's just one that came off in the top of my head. But I remember bringing on Leif Davis at Villa away. Did he bring him on? I can't remember, but I remember Leif Davis coming on at Villa away, and that was a fantastic sort of substitution as well. I think someone went off injured. And he was brilliant that day, Leif Davis. Why we didn't keep Leif Davis is another conversation itself. But yeah, no, I think there was ample opportunities and ample obvious signs and times where Bielsa could change a game on an instant, do a few tweaks that we've never seen before. The only real tweak I've ever seen from Daniel Farke was, do you remember when we played Norwich away and we won the game 3-2? And at 2-0 down, he basically threw on all the attackers and we ended up winning the game 3-2. And he's tried that a few more times. I can't remember of any of the examples where it didn't go for him, but there will be. But I remember a number of times we've seen Daniel Farke, his only real tweak is to go sort of start putting Dan James at wing back and just literally throw all strikers on and hope we get a goal, which can work and did obviously work at Norwich in the Norwich away game and probably for Norwich. But I don't think that's not the same as what Bielsa did when he went from a sort of 4-1-4-1 to a 3-4-3 mid game and took off his best player. That's the sort of tweak that I'm looking at that goes, wow, that is impressive. So maybe the plan is to be physical and hard to beat at first, and then maybe second season try and evolve to be a better football as we become more established in the Premier League. That's what BMG says. I completely agree, and I think we've seen, and I think when we talk about this, there's always an idea that Daniel Farke is going to get sacked immediately. I don't think the 49ers deem that to be the case. I don't think the 49ers are going to sack Daniel Farke anytime soon. Like if he didn't. Unless he loses next 5, I don't think he's going to get the sack, Daniel Farke, if I'm being totally honest. Because I think they agree with BMG, and I think they see Daniel Farke as a long-term option. We saw the Prague interview when when he first appointed Daniel Farke, and he talked about this is a long-term appointment. I think he thinks, like you do, like we're sort of saying now, BMG, I think he sees Daniel Farke as a long-term solution, and I think he thinks Daniel Farke can get Leeds United promoted, playing a certain style of play, adapt it in that first season in the Premier League, and then slowly, as the team gets better over a number of years, can keep adapting his system and go back to then his more style of play that he played in the Championship when we get better players and we've had more investment in the team. I completely agree with you. I think that's Daniel Farke's plan, and I think that's interesting because when we talk about maybe bringing in like a David Moyes type manager or like a Sean Dyche type manager, they're not someone who can do that for me. They're someone that is their style of play and they're going to continue to play it. But they're not someone that can adapt when they've got a better team, play a better brand of football. Like, I don't think, if Daniel Farke had the Brighton team, I don't think he'd be playing long ball like we were against Newcastle. I think he was doing that because we've got the squad that we've got. So I completely agree with you. BMG says, good point about Bielsa. How did he end up losing so many, though? Because fundamentally, our squad in the Premier League was horrendous under Bielsa. That's how he lost so many games. But he was absolutely fantastic, Bielsa. I mean, I'd take Bielsa back in a heartbeat, but that's regardless. I was going to mention that Norwich game when he played a 3-1-6 and we won 3-2. Yeah, no, exactly. Mark, good question. A combination of injuries, small squad, crap recruitment, and a style being found out, I guess. I never thought actually Bielsa's style got fully found out, if I'm being totally honest. I just thought we didn't have the squad to carry on playing that system. I think the Bielsa system, I mean, this is a bit of a different conversation, but I think what happened with Bielsa fundamentally was that team played that brand of football, which is so high intensity, so much hard training for so many years, it got burnt out. And I think we got burnt out. And then I think we started to pick up more injuries. As you said, we had a small squad. We didn't have enough quality in the team. We had Rafinha, but that was and Rodrigo, who was at times good, but was inconsistent for a lot of his Leeds United career, in my personal opinion. I think we've got a better squad now. And if you remember the midfield that we had to play like Pascal Struijk in all the midfield. It was a nightmare. We had a Click that was too old at a moment in time as well. I love Click. He's one of my favourite ever Leeds players. But we had an aging squad as well. And I just think I think the summer that we finished 9th, that is where we should have absolutely gone for it in the market and spent every single penny we could. And then I think we'd have been absolutely fine. I actually think we'd potentially we'd definitely still be in the Premier League, in my opinion. That's where I'm at with it. But that was my issue. Bang on for me, we are lacking Prem experience. We are lacking Prem experience, but it's not always about Prem experience as well, in the same regard. I think part of, like, for example, Sean Longstaff's got Prem experience, but it doesn't mean that he's actually that unbelievable on the ball. It just means that he's played in the Premier League before. Whereas actually, you can have players that, like Sunderland, haven't recruited loads of players that are played in the Premier League, but it's working because they've picked well, and they've picked good players. All that Premier League experience allows for you is I think it negates risk. Mainly, that's the main thing that Premier League experience allows. Not that you're going to get better players because they've got Premier League experience. You're just less likely for them to go wrong. But what that comes with, for me, is a price increase. I think players that are playing in the Premier League and then are going to another Premier League club naturally will always cost more money because there's less risk attached to that player, if that makes sense. Whereas I think you can pick out someone from the La Liga or Serie A or any other league in the world who will cost less because there's more risk attached. But there's potentially more upside as well. So I think that's something to bear in mind. I'm not sure whether we'll recruit in January, but either way, our fate will depend on a lot on the likes of Longstaff, Stack, etc., performing to the maximum of their ability every week. In fact, the whole team. Yeah, no, exactly. For Leeds United to stay up, we're going to have to be. In a lot of games, we're going to go into them as the team with the worst quality, in my personal opinion. I don't think we've got an unbelievable squad, in my personal opinion. So I think naturally we're always going to be underdogs. but underdogs can stay in the league. I remember the year we actually got relegated, and Bournemouth had just lost 9-0 away at Liverpool and looked absolutely dead and buried for relegation. And Gary O'Neill galvanised the squad, and they actually stayed in the division. And they had an awful squad. They were destined to go down. Even look at, and it's a different, I know it's a different league, but even look at that Sheffield Wednesday team. The year they stayed up under Danny Rowe, where they were absolutely gone. And they had an absolutely woeful squad. And Danny Rowe managed to adapt game by game and keep them in the division. And as I said, I think Daniel Farke can do. I think Daniel Farke or a new manager can do similar with this squad, because I don't think this squad's bad enough to not be able to compete. If that makes sense, I think it's at a certain. I don't think it's brilliant, but I think it can compete. But we've just got to be smart, and we've got to adapt to our opposition, and we've got to pick up points and win the games that are most important. And if you look so far outside of the Burnley game, we have done that. To be fair, we've beat West Ham at home, we've beat Wolves away, and we've beat Everton at home. They've probably been them four have been our best games, and we've won 3 of them. So we are doing okay. To be fair, we've got to carry on and beat Burnley at home. We've got to potentially beat the likes of Wolves at home as well. We've got to beat Forest at home. We've got to beat all these other lower teams. We've got to beat the likes of Fulham's at home as well. Mark Bradley, I think we probably are. Longstaff has been one of our better players, and he has the experience. Although Gabby has no zero experience. Yeah, he has. That's what I mean. So it's not always about, like, our best signing for me so far this season potentially has been Goodmanson, the left back. I think he was unbelievable in the first sort of like 5 or 6 games. I think he's slightly dropped his level in the last few, if I'm being totally honest. But I think he's been one of our better players. And he ain't got any Premier League experience. And I think, look at Sunderland, as I said, they've got loads of players that have done really well this season, like Siddiqui. Did he come from the Pro League, Siddiqui? And he's been brilliant for Sunderland. Alderete as well, the centre-half of them, has been brilliant. Didn't come from the Premier League. So I think that you can pick players from alternative leagues and they work, but there's just more risk applied, I think. Forest seemed destined to go down the year we did. I still want to know what happened at half-time in that Palace game. That's where it fell apart. Yeah, I know. Well, apparently there was that argument, wasn't there, between Cooper. Apparently there was an argument in the dressing room. But as soon as that, Rocker made a mistake and he gave away a foul, they scored the set piece. And then it went in 1-1 and it just basically killed us. But if you look at the squad that we played in that Forest game, that we actually fielded for that Forest game, and compare it to the squad now, I think our squad's miles better now. I think it's miles better. But that is because the fundamentally, Radrazani and that ownership group, their recruitment was absolutely abhorrent. And they didn't back us in that year. They just did not back us at all. And the signings we made when we sold Rafinha and Phillips is what killed us off in the end, because they were our only final 2 really good players, I thought, at the football club. And we sold them off and we brought like Brendan Aronson for 30-odd million quid. Who's still here and still capped for in the Premier League, and we always still do we buy. I'm trying to even think. But we bought quite a few players. We spent about 100 million quid. Rockers, Tyler Adams, who alright, is doing well now, but Rocker was awful in the Premier League for us. And it just went horribly. It went absolutely horribly. But as you said, you are right. Forest were absolutely destined to go down. Evening, Scott, have you had a good stream yet? Yeah, it's been good, mate. It's been really good. I get the Bielsa thing with the change, but then why did Bielsa make correct changes when we lost so many? I get the Bielsa thing with that change, but then again, why did Bielsa make correct changes when we lost so many? Oh, so why did he make? I get what you're trying to say. For me, Bielsa should never been sacked. I thought he was the best manager I've ever seen in my lifetime at Leeds United, comfortably. I just don't think the squad was good enough, Mark, under Bielsa. I think the reason we lost so many games under Bielsa was because in the first season, the squad massively overperformed. And I don't think fundamentally it could carry on doing it. And I think with when we finished 9th under Bielsa, we had to just back the living hell out of him. And we at that point on PSR, we'd have had so much money we could have spent. We could have easily failed into 150 million spend if Radrazani had put his hands in his pockets, and then we'd have been absolutely fine. If we'd have put another 150 million quid with Bielsa, who could attract really good players, we'd have been absolutely fine. We'd still be in the Premier League now. I'm convinced of it. And actually, the only people always sort of criticise the 49ers, and I get that because I think the summer transfer window wasn't as good as it could have been. But I do think if they were in that same position and they'd have gone up with Bielsa and would have finished 9th, that year I think they'd back the hell out of him. I don't think they make the same mistake that Radrazani do. I don't think they'd have done it on the cheap in the same regard. I just don't think they would have done. BMG says, best signings, Gabby, Longstaff, Okafor, Stack. Then no one else has enough minutes. I think most of them will play a part, but not sure about Bornau. Yeah, Bornau is just a backup, innit? He's just a backup that if our centre halves get injured, we don't have to play the likes of Ethan Ampadu at centre back this year. I think that's the reason of Bornau. He's only £5 million. So yeah, but I agree. I always said with the summer transfer window, I mean, this is kind of off topic, but I don't think it's as much about sort of what we did. It's about what we didn't do, if that makes sense. Like, the signings we brought in, I think, are pretty good. Like, I still think Stack will be a really good signing. Okafor looks fantastic. In my opinion, Goodmanson looks fantastic. I still think DCL's been pretty decent for the fact we paid nothing for him. I know he's on big money, but we didn't actually pay an actual fee for him. So I think the signs have been good. I just think the issue is that we just don't have enough of them. I've said this a few videos ago. We were just £50 million short in the summer, in my opinion. Like, if we'd have had £50 million more with this squad in the summer, we'd have been absolutely fine. But we just didn't have the extra 50 million. BMG says, though, there is the story that Bielsa wanted a small squad and refused players, but I'm not sure how true that is. I think that potentially was true, but I just think we needed, that summer that we finished 9th, we just needed a squad overhaul. We need to get some players out of the club and bring some new players in and freshen up the team, in my personal opinion. That's what we needed. Like, there's no way, and BMG, you'll definitely agree with this, there's no way that Bielsa would have wanted our holding midfielder, if our holding midfield replacement for Calvin Phillips, to be Pascal Struijk. Do you know what I mean? But I do agree with you. But I also think part of that was a board thing, in terms of, like, it was an Angus Kinnear and Radrizzani thing, saying that Bielsa wanted a really, really small squad. So basically, they didn't have to spend as much money. But they just weren't good enough operators, fundamentally. Them people in charge at that point were not good enough operators at this level. And if we had Bielsa with the 49ers, we'd be absolutely fine. Because Bielsa would keep this squad up, in my opinion. I think we'd finish quite high in the league, actually, with Bielsa in charge. And I think fundamentally as well, if with Bielsa then after we finished 9th, I think the 49ers would have backed the hell out of him at that point. Let's have a look. AG Leeds says, evening, mate. Evening to you, mate. Mark says, bang on. So much on the players you have at your disposal. Bang on. So much on the players you have at your disposal. Yeah, no, look, when we're talking about Daniel Farke and we're talking about managerial stuff, players have got to take responsibility. Like, they have to do. Like, there's Daniel Farke can't account for some things. Like, if an individual mistake happens in a game, he can't really account for that. Like, the third goal at the weekend, that isn't, for me, that was not Daniel Farke's fault. That was Bogle being poor in possession. Then it was terrible defending where we switched off, nose marking the back post. That is woeful. And that stuff like that can't be accounted for. And there'll be stuff like Jim Mellier throwing a few in his back of his net last year. Stuff like that can't be accounted for. Obviously, eventually he's got to make the change, and that's when it becomes his problem. But when a player makes an off decision, so like the Fulham game, for example, where Gabby Goodmanson sort of chests the ball into his own goal, Daniel Farke is not responsible for that loss, in my personal opinion. It would be an interest to see. It would be interesting to see where we'd be if Nonto and James had been fully fit, since our weak spot is right wing, really, despite Aronson going okay. He does a job but doesn't create much. Yeah, no, that would be interesting. I don't think, to be honest with you, that we'd be doing much better, if I'm being totally honest. I think Nonto and James are both upgrades on Brendan Aronson, but I don't think they're enough upgrades to the point where we'd have we'd see a revolutionised team, if I'm being totally honest. I don't think we'd see that. That's my feeling. I don't think we'd see that. I think they're better than Aronson, but I don't think they're better enough than Aronson, if that makes total sense. It's not like bringing Harry Wilson into where I think you'd see quite an improvement. I don't think that's the same with Nonto. I think what happens with players, and this happens at every club, it's not just at Leeds United, but I think when players don't play, I think we put them up to another level and we think they're better than they are, and we sort of go on constantly, and we go, oh, if we bring this player back, then everything's going to change. And in reality, we forget that actually they're not that good. Like, Nonto was pretty decent in the Championship, but he wasn't like Somerville's season in the Championship. So taking him into the Premier League, I don't think we're going to see. And we also saw Nonto at the start of the season as well, and he was all right, but he wasn't a world beater, if we're being totally honest. And I don't think we're going to see that Nonto. We need to see the Nonto we saw under Jesse Marsh. If we see that Nonto, yes, let's get through it. We haven't seen that Nonto for 2.5 years now. Do you know the Nonto that first came in and broke on the scene? was outstanding for Leeds United. We haven't seen that Nonto since. Changes, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Yeah, exactly. Farke out. Yes, Farke out. I'm not actually saying that Farke should be out, if I'm being totally honest. BMG says, we've been unlucky that several players who could have been sold have been tanked. Namely Harrison and Mez. Could have got a few mil for them at one point, but not anymore. Yeah, I know. Do you remember with Jack Harrison, actually, when this was another sort of Radrazani mistake? I mean, we could go all day with this. But do you remember when Newcastle was sniffing around him in the Premier League? And we just sold, it was the year we sold Rafinha and Phillips, and we were all saying we don't actually need the money. But we should have cashed in on Harrison then, because they want to pay 25 million plus at that moment. And imagine getting 25 million for Harrison now. I mean, it would be brilliant. And it's the same with Meslier as well. I mean, he had that fantastic year when we finished 9th. And loads of clubs were in for him at that point. I remember Man United sniffing, PSG sniffing, you name it. All of them were sniffing around Meslier, and we probably could have got a decent fee at that summer. There was quotes around 40 million being said for Meslier. I mean, looking back, that'd have been absolutely unbelievable if we'd have got that sort of money for Meslier, because for me, he was never that good, if I'm being honest. I know he had that good season the first year went up, but I think we could have looked at that team, in my opinion, and gone, that's where we could have got some serious money there. And this is what I mean when we were saying about earlier about Bielsa and that when we finished 9th. When we finished 9th under Bielsa, we had a few players in that team, for me, that it was quite obvious that they drastically overperformed. And at that moment, I think we could have got serious money for them. Like, I look at likes of Bamford. I remember Spurs sniffing around for Bamford, and we didn't want to sell him because he just scored 16 goals, I think, or 17 goals in the Premier League. And they were sniffing around £40 million for Patrick Bamford at that moment. We should have sold him immediately then. We should have sold him immediately. We should have gone, well done, Bamford. Thanks for your time. You're never going to be 40 million again, and sell it. Because that's what we don't do at this football club. We haven't done it for years. We've started to do it, thank God. But for the longest time, we never sold players at the peak. We waited until they got crap, and then we ended up either keeping them or selling them on the cheap. We never, ever cashed in at their top value. We should have got 40 million for Meslier when he was at his top value. We should have got 40 million for Bamford when he was at his top value. We should have got serious money for Jack Harrison when he was at his top value after them first few seasons, and we never did it once. And we're living that mess to now, to be honest with you. I would argue Jesse did more with less. Farke's got a better squad and not performing much better at the same stage of the season. The only thing, I think it was more obvious with Jesse Marsch that it wasn't going to work than it is with Daniel Farke. Potentially, I get what you're saying. I just think it was more obvious. I also think with the Jesse Marsch team, to be fair, there was still we had Rodrigo at that point. I don't think we've got anyone at that level anymore. I know that's kind of contrary to what I've said earlier, but I think Jesse Marsch should have been sacked, is what I'm trying to say. But I do get your point. I just think when you watch Jesse Marsch's team, for me, there were so many obvious errors that he was making, in my personal opinion, so many glaring mistakes. Whereas I don't think there's as many glaring mistakes with sort of Daniel Farke. Like, do you remember him saying, like, he had Rafinha on long throw-ins, which I think people have laughed at since, which is obviously right, so we're laughing at the time. We were playing this really narrow system, which I never agreed with. I remember him talking about, he didn't realise that going on the back post was a strategy in the Premier League, not marking your back post. Do you remember the thing as well with Marsch where from every corner we had, our own corners, we used to get counter-attacked on every single time because he didn't know how to set up a defensive, an out-of-possession formation to stop a counter-attack from a corner. Like, there was just obvious things. Like, every single corner we had, if we didn't win the initial contact, from our own corner, we used to get counter-attacks on, and we conceded so many goals in the counter-attack with that. It was ridiculous. We might get a chance to cash in on Joffe if he carries on like this. Hopefully, Joseph too. Yeah, I think that's part of the obvious thing with the loans, isn't it? Hopefully Joffe will have a brilliant season this year at Hull, and either he stays on at Hull and we get some serious money out of Hull, or another club ends up buying him. Because if he puts up like he's on 5 goals already, if he gets 15 goals this season, and he gets 10 assists, he's probably a £15 million player. So that would be fantastic. That would be really fantastic. And Joseph, again, if he scores 10 goals in La Liga, it could be £30 million. Because look at Tino Barry. He scored 10 goals in La Liga last year, and he's just gone to Everton for £30 million. We have let soft goals in and missed a few chances. Could have been even more points. Yeah, we have let soft goals in, especially in recent weeks. That's one thing that's actually concerning. It was one thing I was going to bring up, actually. I think we are conceding too many goals under Daniel Farke at the moment. I really do think that, to be fair. I do agree with that. Marsh should have been sacked before the World Cup, and it would have been if we had come back to win versus Liverpool and Bournemouth. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, should have been. Yeah, should have been. I never want Leeds United to lose, ever. Never want Leeds United to lose. But actually, Leeds United losing them 2 games would have ended up with a better season, in my opinion. It would have ended up in a better season. As Jack said as well, Joseph would be pro-profit. Yeah, he would. Farke's current mistake, we've conceded more goals within 5 minutes of a sub than any other team. That's 100% on Farke. I don't think it's that simple, mate. I really don't. We talked about it earlier, actually. I don't think Daniel Farke's brilliant with his substitutions, but I don't think just because we're conceding within 5 minutes of substitutes, that's all on Farke. I really don't think that. If I'm being honest. Mark says, BMG correct, Nonto has a lot to improve, and a lot saying he will be our saviour on the wing, really. Yeah, no, I agree. I think Nonto's decent. I think he's all right, and I think he's better, as I said, he's better than Aronson. I don't think he's going to revolutionise our season on the right-hand side, if I'm being totally honest. Sue me. I just don't think that's the case. I really don't. If we sack Farke, who do we get? Says Brick. I don't know. I think if we did ever end up sacking Farke, I'd probably do a list of... I've got a few in mind. Like, there's a few managers I'd love. Like Terzic, I'd love, but I don't know if he'd ever come to Leeds. But if we could get someone like Terzic, that would be fantastic. The reason I like him... I mean, I don't really want to talk about this too much because he hasn't left and it feels a bit wrong. But Terzic I would love. I just don't think he'd come. Because Terzic managed to lead Dortmund to a final of the Champions League. And the way you do that is by... Because Dortmund are not one of the best teams in the Champions League. So the way you do that is by adapting game by game to get yourself through ties against better teams. I would love Terzic. I think that would be... I think that'd be in my absolute top pick. He's out of work at the moment as well. So, but I just don't think he takes the job, if I'm being totally honest. So yeah, he'd be absolutely top of my list. Rafa Benitez, I think he just took a job, actually. I think he's just took a job, Rafa Benitez. I wouldn't hate Rafa, actually, because again, I think he's moulding the style. To be honest, people might hate this, but again, when we're talking about a manager that suits this team and what sort of manager suits this team, I wouldn't hate if Everton parted ways with David Moyes. I wouldn't hate the idea of David Moyes. I really wouldn't, because I think David Moyes suits our playing squad. I think the way David Moyes plays, the long ball approach, I think he suits us. So I wouldn't be that opposed to that. If you could get 2 players in and get rid of 2 players in January, who would they be? Are we on about players that are actually in the 11? I think we should be I think we should be selling Perot in January for sure, because I still think he's only 6 months ago he scored 19 Premier League goals, Championship goals, and I still don't think we're going to ever use him in the Premier League. So I'd get rid of him. The other one, I mean, if we could get, it depends on valuations, but if we could get some nice money for the likes of a Melier or a Harrison, that'd be nice. That'd be nice. Or an Aronson. But I don't think we could. I'll say Melier, but he's going to go anywhere. But I'll say Melier and Perot, because I think Perot's good, because I think we could still get good money for him. Any other teams in the... Are other teams in the Prem better now than then? Yes. Yeah, the Premier League this season is as good as it's ever been, in my opinion. Every single season, the development of the season, based on the money that these clubs get, the season gets better and better and better, and the teams get better and better. The year we finished 9th under Bielsa, I don't think in this division we finished 9th with how we played that season, if that makes sense. I don't think we would have done. I think we'd have stayed up, but I don't think we'd have finished 9th. Because I just think the league's better. I think the mid-table teams in the league now are so good. I think the likes of Brightons and sort of Bournemouth and these sort of teams, even Villas now, these teams are so good. They are really, really good teams. And I don't think they were that good when we were the last time we got promoted. I don't think they were. I think Rads didn't have enough dosh. Yeah, didn't. I remember actually Rads when we got promoted, I think he was the poorest owner in the division, which sort of says it all in terms of a capital. What do you think will happen this Saturday against Forest? Well, you have to wait, mate, for the preview. I'll give you an answer. I'm worried about the Forest game, if I'm being honest. I think if we go 1-0 down at Forest, we'll probably get beat. If you want my honest opinion, and I don't like to be negative, I've actually never ever predicted a loss on this channel so far, because I didn't actually do a preview for the Arsenal game. So I'm worried about the Forest game. If I was to guess, if I had a gun to my head, I think we'd get beat at Forest. If I'm being totally honest, don't shoot the messenger. I think that's the most likely outcome. If BL kicks on, I wouldn't be opposed to Pascal going. Yeah, I think that's not a bad shout. I don't think that's a bad shout. It's not because Pascal is an awful footballer. It's more because he's someone that could bring in capital to help us reinvest. Like I've said this a few times actually before. Like we've got BL and Pascal as sort of our and Rodon, and we've almost got 3 starting centre halves in my opinion. Like 3 players that should be starting. Because I don't even think Strout was bad enough to really take him out. It was just we needed to get BL in the team. So I think we've almost got 3 starting centre halves there. And I think the money would bet if we sold Pascal for say whatever you could say you could sell him for 25 million. Say we sold Pascal for 25 million quid. I would rather have that 25 million quid and better buy a right winger than have Pascal, if that makes sense. Even though I wouldn't want rid of Pascal. I think that might be a better outcome. Like we've got 2 good starting left-sided centre halves, but we don't have a right winger at all at the football club that's good enough in my opinion. So you'd be probably better cashing in on Pascal and then having that. But I know what you mean. Like Pascal's he's not one of our worst players, so you don't really want rid of him. It's just where could the money come from? The thing with Pascal as well is he's only got 18 months left on his deal. I think at this moment in January, he'll have his 18 months left on his deal. So that's a potential that you could cash in for that reason as well. This stream's gone on for ages, by the way, tonight. Just thinking it's pure profit, BMG. Yeah, exactly. That's I think we sort of agree there, Jack. BMG says, if you split the league into thirds, Brighton are basically top 3rd team, and we are a bottom 3rd team. An away game versus them was always going to be a likely loss. Yeah, I said this at the weekend. I completely agree. When we looked at how Leeds United were going to stay in the division, and the 49ers looked at it in the summer, and they probably sat down with Farke and looked at how Leeds United stay up in the summer. We weren't targeting teams chasing Europe away from home to pick up our points. We weren't. We were targeting the bottom 3rd teams at home and at away. What can we do against Burnley's, probably against Sunderland's at that point, against the likes of Fulham's and West Ham's and Wolves, these sort of teams? What can we do against them, and can we beat them teams at home? That's what we were targeting. Because we're trying to get 10 wins here, really. 10 wins gets you 30 points. 10 draws gets you 40 points. That's what we were targeting, and we weren't targeting Brighton as one of them points. I don't think we were. So sell Struijk and Bornau the backup. Yikes! Yeah, I know. It's not the fact that I want to sell Pascal Struijk at all. It's the fact that I'd rather have the Pascal money for a right winger if we can't afford a right winger. If that makes sense. It's not an ideal scenario. I don't want to sell Pascal. I quite like Pascal, and I think he's actually adapted to the league not as badly as people think. But it's just where you're going to use that money. BMG says, I see the logic, but I think we need him. Maybe in the summer for the profit. If we need a right winger, we could perhaps find a loan for 6 months. Yeah. Yeah, there's a conversation here about Pascal and if we should sell him. Yeah, it's not the idea. As I said, selling Pascal is not because I think Pascal's a bad player. It's nothing like that. It's just the idea. That's a better answer actually. But it's not that Pascal's bad or anything like that. It's just that where would I like the money to be spent? Ideally. Like, we probably should have sold Pascal in the summer, if we're being totally honest. Got the money, because he's pure profit is Pascal, basically. So say we got 20 million quid for Pascal in the summer. Say we got that as a standard fee. And then we bought in someone on loan for the season. That would have been a better use of money than then bought a £25 million winger. That would have been better. Sell Pro and Grev. Yeah, that's not a bad option. That's not bad. Yeah, that's not bad. Because Grev with our midfield, he doesn't have a place in it, does he? If we're being totally honest. The only thing is, I think Farke likes Grev because I think he thinks if Ampadu's injured, he'd rather play Grev in there. I disagree. I'd play Stack in there if we had to, but I think he would play Grev. Yeah, could go on for free. Yeah, I think we're going to have to sign Pascal to a new deal. Anyway, to be honest with you, we're probably getting to the end. We've gone away from Daniel Farke's discussion slightly, but I hope you've enjoyed the show. It's been a much bigger show tonight. We've had loads of comments in. It's actually been one of my best shows I've done in a long time, and we've actually gone away from it as such. I'll get into a few more comments and then I will jump off. BMG says, as a fan base, we must accept that we are likely to lose roughly half the games, maybe more, but we can still stay up. I hate this stack Farke stuff after every loss. Yeah, I do. I really do. We said that at the weekend. The only reason the part of this video is that we have got a part, like, this is a community, this channel. That's the whole point of what we're trying to do here. It's why it's not called my name. It's why it's called the Leeds Lens, because it's not about just my opinion, which is what I think I do too much. So it's trying to get people involved who maybe don't agree with the rhetoric that Daniel Farke should just stay. Not that I think he should be sacked. It's more the idea that if he's going to be, like, what are the because he's not perfect, and what were the reasons why he could be sacked? And I think we've covered that. I think we've covered quite a bit of that. Disagree on Strauch. He's one of our longest serving players, and we need his experience. Fair enough. Yeah, I think that's. I understand that. I understand that. Anyway, thanks all for watching. As always, as I said, one of my biggest shows in a long time. And one of my most enjoyable shows by country mile. So I hope you've all enjoyed the show as well. And I will see you all tomorrow for some more. We've got a bit preview tomorrow, right? Because I think we'll have Daniel Farke's presser. We might not though, because we do play on Sunday. So I don't know. I think he usually does them on Thursday, doesn't it? BMG, it's always better when I'm on. You are a good commenter on BMG, I must admit, without blowing too much smoke. You are. We enjoy you, BMG. We like you on the channel. Anyway, thanks all for watching, as always. And I will see you all later, everybody. Bye for now. Also, as well, if you could drop a like, subscribe, all that sort of jazz, that would be fantastic. There's also this new hype button. If you could hype the video as well, that would be massively helpful. I'm only a small channel, so I don't get tons of likes. So your one like is like maybe 10% onto my like total. So yeah, if you could do that, that would be fantastic. But I hate asking. It just feels so